CMI celebrates our 75th anniversary, we're looking ahead to the next decade. We face new priorities, a pandemic that has changed working lives in profound ways, a continued productivity challenge, and increasing environmental threats. We set out to gather evidence, data, insight, and case studies over many months to understand how we can boost opportunity and business capabilities. Our report, The Everyone Economy, has a simple message. Diversity and inclusion are key to securing sustained success in business, public services, and all organisations, and we all have a long way to go. Our data finds that we're wasting talent just when we need it most. CMI analysis shows there are 560,000 missing female managers in the UK, 420,000 missing managers from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, 290,000 missing managers with disabilities, and 100,000 missing managers from diverse ethnic groups. Stellar talent is too often overlooked. In a survey of UK employees, we found that over half reported they have either witnessed or experienced discrimination in the workplace. And more than 2 in 5 said they had themselves been discriminated against at work due to their identity.
I worked for a recruitment organisation in a building of about 300. I was the only black woman that wasn't a cleaner. See, I've got quite big hair. I used to wear my hair as I'm wearing it now and in lots of different natural styles, and my contract wasn't renewed. And I remember people in my team being in uproar, like, this doesn't make any sense. And I remember the last day I had my hair straightened, just purely coincidentally, and the lady that had chosen not to extend my contract, she saw me in the corridor and she said, "Oh, your hair looks really nice. It's a shame you didn't do it like that before. Maybe it would have worked out differently for you here."
I had a visitor. He was collaborating with my department on a project, and he came and he said, "Can I speak to a man?" And I said, "There are no men here. You can wait a while till we hire one, or I can help you." And he actually thought about it for 2 minutes, and he was so reluctant to speak with me.
I was, to all intents and purposes, non-disabled. I just got on with my life a bit differently. Then came the neurosurgery, and I couldn't breathe. I was reliant on oxygen. I couldn't swallow for about 5 months, and I took about 3 years to learn to talk again. I was turned away. Never forget that I was turned away from a building because I could not make myself understood. And the humiliation, the discrimination made me realise that it was unavoidable. I was severely disabled.
As a result of me moving from place to place, I went to multiple schools. I left school with no GCSEs. I didn't get a single qualification until I was 24 years old. Be it whether you're a black person, whether you're someone from a lower class area, you constantly feel like you have some form of imposter syndrome because you're in a place where you don't naturally feel like you belong.
CMI was founded in 1947 to help the UK recover from war. 75 years on, we urgently need a new plan. A plan to see inclusion and diversity placed at the heart of business and organisational success. This means ask challenging questions and really listen to the answers. Talk less and do more. Plan and track your progress. Embrace approaches that work and make every manager responsible and accountable for this agenda. The process won't be straightforward, but the benefits for the economy, organisations and individuals will be huge. Let's work together to make the Everyone Economy a reality. Read our report, adopt our recommendations, make a change today.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm Francke, the Chief Executive of CMI, and thank you too for pivoting from the in-person event that we had originally planned. As you know, this is CMI's 75th anniversary. That's 75 years of our mission, turning accidental managers into conscious and capable leaders. And as you just saw in the video, CMI was created after the country had faced monumental upheaval from the Second World War. It gave us the chance to do things differently. Now, today, we face a similar choice as we emerge from a common COVID crisis. Will the status quo address the challenges of pandemic recovery, of growth, climate change, and the cost of living? Or do we need a new plan? At CMI, we believe it's clear we need a new plan. So we undertook an extensive project into the role that managers and leaders must play in the future to deliver positive, sustainable change. The result? The Everyone Economy, CMI's plan for sharing work, opportunity, and success. From the start, we were clear that to have a measurable impact, we needed to reach beyond the managers and leaders who get it, who get the importance of inclusivity, and reach out to those leaders and managers who perhaps don't see the value or relevance or may even feel resistant or threatened. So in this report, we focused on the very hard-nosed business case for why inclusion and maximizing talent matters to results. We're not talking about ethics or morals, but rather about what leads to and produces innovation, boosts productivity, and profitability. Sharing opportunities more equally is good for business, not just about doing good. I'm joined by some fantastic guests and colleagues here tonight who are going to tell you more about the Everyone Economy. CMI's President and Chair of the 75th Advisory Council, Lord Mark Price, Advisory Council member, Sir Trevor Phillips, and our own Head of Policy, Daisy Hooper, who will take us through the findings of the report itself, whilst Policy Director Anthony Painter will chair a panel Q&A, including questions from you, the audience. While you're listening tonight, I have an ask. Please think about what practical changes you will make to your own workplace to make the Everyone Economy a reality. As you will hear in a moment, it's your job. Now, I'm delighted to pass you over to Mark to tell us more about this project.
Thank you very much, Anne, and welcome everybody. I'm only sorry that we couldn't meet in person in Westminster. Sadly, the train strike made that difficult for us today, but I'm so pleased that so many of you have joined us online to talk about or listen to the Everyone Economy report. As I said, the CMI was set up in 1947 as the British Institute of Management, and it was set up with government support so that we could instill through the CMI and the Institute good management practices to build on the technical skills that people might have, and so to power the economy forward. It seems very fitting 75 years later that as we exit COVID, we once again think about what is it that we can do as the CMI to help managers power productivity and profitability as we emerge from COVID and the other challenges that we're facing. I'm delighted that so many talented people joined our advisory council. And in Oscar style now, I hope you'll forgive me, I just want to acknowledge all of those people. We were joined by Ewan Blair, Monica Shada, Sherry Cootie, Baroness Faulkner, Anne herself, David Grayson, Jeanette Linsher, Adam Marshall, Dr. Alice Maynard, Angela Noon, Teddy Nashire, Sir Trevor Phillips, Lord Kevin Shinquin, who you heard from in the video, Julia Stevenson, Dame Julia Unwin, Elizabeth Ubene, and Aviva Whittingbird Cox. And we were all ably supported, and I have to acknowledge them, by the team at CMI. On the policy team, Hamish Shah, Jules Bellingham and Daisy Cooper. In the research team, Liz Spratt, Madalena Radu and Stacey Hughes, and as you'll hear later, Anthony Painter, Elaine McLean, and a special call out to Will Smith. We're really grateful for all of the support that you gave us. The committee and the council met over the course of 9 months, and during that time we looked at a number of areas. We looked at ethnicity, where Kirshner Faulkner and Cherry Cooter provided provocation for the committee. On socio-economic background, we had a presentation from Justin Greening, and also Jeanette provided provocation. On sex, gender and sexual orientation, we heard from Dr. Heather Melville and also Ian Anderson, who was the government LGBT business champion. We looked at disability in April, and David Grayson and Kevin Shinkwin gave us a perspective. And then finally, we looked at age and the challenges of age and the 100-year life with Aviva Whittingberg-Cox. And all of that gave us a really powerful insight into where the opportunities may lie going forward, beyond teaching managers all of the soft skills or core skills they need to fully utilise the talents and technical skills they've been given to power the economy forward. Now, we saw lots of details about the benefits of having an inclusive economy. Work from McKinsey that said that if you have greater gender diversity, you're likely to have 25% higher productivity. The Boston Consulting Group talked about the benefits to innovation. PwC, who wrote a report about the benefits of diversity and an extra 1.4% profitability. The OECD, who talked about higher GDP by 20% by 2050 if we had a more multi-generational workforce. So there's lots of very powerful academic evidence that says a more diverse and inclusive workforce will power better results. But what our survey found is that a lot of people feel that they are being discriminated against. As you saw in the opening shot, 2 out of 5 have seen discrimination or feel discriminated against, but it's higher in minority groups. LGBTQ plus community, 64% said they had been discriminated against. People from a black background, 63% said they'd been discriminated against. But then if we ask people, is your organisation inclusive? Actually, a very high percentage say it is, 90%. And so what we have is a gap between those that feel that they're being discriminated against and people's perception of what it's like in their workforce. But the real power, I think, of this report, and very soon Daisy will take you through more of the details, is it starts to analyse what are the real gaps. And they're these. Over the course of the last 10 years, the percentage of women in management positions in the UK has risen from 40 to 41%. It's gone up a little. But by 2027, we will see more than 2.5 times women entering the workforce than men. And yet, we know from our research that 560,000 places should be allocated to women managers if there were to be a fair balance between the sexes. If you look at socio-economic groups, we know that if there was equal distribution of management roles, an extra 420,000 people from lower social economic groups would gain those positions. 1 in 5 people now register themselves as disabled, and yet there are 290,000 fewer disabled people in management than should be the case. And lastly, if you look at people from diverse ethnic groups, you find that there is an underrepresentation by around 100,000. And yet, what we know is that proportion of people from diverse ethnic groups will increase in our workforce from 15% to around 30% over the course of the next 25 years. And so what this report identifies is a gap in terms of inclusion, talent that is being missed and lost to drive our economy forward. And what the report calls for, and you'll hear from Daisy now, is a relentless focus on inclusion. Thank you, and I'd now like to hand over to Daisy to take you through the report's conclusions.
So sorry, I'm on mute. I was saying, I believe I have some slides. Thank you very much. So good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Daisy Hooper and I am Head of Policy at CMI. I'm going to run you through some of the headline findings. As we heard at the very start of the event, the big story here is that we are really wasting talent. And that is holding back individuals, it's holding back organizations, and it is holding back the economy as a whole. But we can also see some excellent practice. And so we know that change is possible, but it's going to take concerted effort from all of us. As Mark and Anne both highlighted, there's a growing body of evidence that demonstrates the link between diversity and organizational performance. And so if you care about good quality work, if you care about world-class public services, if you care about a dynamic and thriving economy, you need to care about equality, diversity, and inclusion, because it is the key to unlocking potential. But as we'll see from the numbers in a minute, we still have a really long way to go to realize these economic gains. So Mark highlighted some of the stats, and I think some people were asking about whether they're referenced in the comments. They are indeed in our report. So we highlight the fact that although 1 in 4 working people in the UK is a manager, is in a management role, the makeup of the management population as a whole has changed at a glacial pace over the past 10 years. Too many groups remain underrepresented in management positions, and this is not just fundamentally unfair that opportunity should be so skewed by background or certain characteristics, but because it has knock-on consequences for organizations and the economy to reach their potential. Mark also highlighted these huge gaps in the management population. So as you can see, 500,000 missing female managers right now in 2022. And demographic changes and pressures on the UK economy, other pressures on the UK economy, are only going to see these gaps get worse, not better, certainly unless we take concerted action now. We also saw that experience of discrimination was incredibly high. More than 50% of people have either witnessed or experienced discrimination themselves. And again, another huge proportion of people being overlooked for a workplace opportunity because of their identity. And if we extrapolate this percentage to the wider UK working population, we estimate that's around 10.5 million people who have been overlooked for an opportunity at work because of their identity. And we also uncover this enormous gap. It's huge between what organizations say they're doing on this agenda and what they're actually doing. If we take just one example from this slide, 88% of managers said that their organization was inclusive of all staff, regardless of ethnic background, but only 47% of them said their organization was doing anything to increase the proportion of employees from diverse ethnic backgrounds through their recruitment practices. And you can see that the figures are similarly stark for the other characteristics, if not more so. And this demonstrates the huge levels of complacency that we see in workplaces. And this is really where we need to focus our attention. This complacency is further evidenced by the fact that respondents were more likely to say their organization was inclusive if their work colleagues are similar to them. So, suggesting a real reluctance to actually reach out to people who look and feel different, to really look outside of a familiar talent pool. And we found evidence of a potential backlash. For example, male managers were more than twice as likely as female managers to say that efforts to improve gender balance in the workplace have gone too far. And this is despite the fact that we still see big gaps between the genders on access to promotion, salary rises, and stretch projects. So most of the recommendations in our report are for managers and organisations themselves, and I'll come to those in just a moment. But government has such a loud voice. It has such huge convening power, such great persuasion power. And so government really needs to do more to use that power and lead by example. We would like to see government think about EDI as central to the UK's economic success. And this means building into all government policy as well as walking the walk itself. It means continuing to have a laser focus on the data to make sure that we can identify gaps and to spur everyone into taking action to address those gaps. It means shining a light on best practice, but also calling out bad practice. So not awarding lucrative contracts to companies that consistently fail to diversify their leadership team or to make progress on equal pay. It also means enabling all workers to take advantage of flexible working. And it's about, oh gosh, sorry, I've just forgotten, lost my train of thought. And it's about really just embedding this in everything we do through championing great management practice every day. So we set out on this research because we thought that this was really important for modern managers. And I suppose in the course of this research, we discovered just how important it is. This really highlights some significant challenges that are only going to be tackled if everyone makes a deliberate choice to identify their own gaps and take action to address them. We do have some really brilliant case studies in the report of organisations that have changed the way they work in order to improve diversity and inclusion and maximise the talent available to them. So we have examples from big corporates, from technology companies, from Transport for London, from small manufacturing firms, and we can all learn from these examples. So I will leave you with the 5 key actions that we're calling for all leaders to demonstrate through their professional practice in order to make change happen. Number 1, ask challenging questions and really pay attention to the answers, even if they're not necessarily what you might like to hear. Number 2, put together a plan and track your progress. Use this feedback to identify your specific organizational challenges and then hold yourself accountable for interventions to address those. Number 3, embrace flexible working. We know that this is one of the best ways to attract and retain a diverse talent pool. Number 4, recognize the central role of all managers. This is not about having an EDI specialist or a head of EDI, although that may be helpful if you're lucky enough to have one in your organization. It's about really making sure managers understand their role, that they're well trained, and that they practice inclusive leadership every day. And finally, number 5, be a storyteller and a role model. Talk about your own experience at work, talk about your challenges, give examples for why this should matter to your organization, as well as ethical reasons. So I hope you found that helpful to understand a bit more of the substantial body of research that sits behind this project. I'm going to hand back now to Sir Trevor Phillips to talk about his reflections of the project.
Thank you very much, Daisy, and good evening, everyone. I'm assuming that you can hear me. Let me first of all say how much I welcome this report. I think that if nothing else, this focuses attention on what we can do rather than just what we think is wrong. Or to put it perhaps in a more practical way for most of us who work in organizations, what is the thing that we most want to do on Monday morning at a meeting with our bosses? We want to look like the smartest person in the room. And I would suggest to everybody on this call that a thorough reading of this report will lift you into that category pretty quickly. What is the main value here of what is being asked by CMI, what is being proposed by this group? Well, first of all, let's just start from where we are. I think it would be churlish not to say that this is a better country than it was when it comes to diversity, equality and inclusion. We have better legislation. There is far more consciousness of the need to act than I think there was in the past. So what do we need to do, though? Well, the first thing, and I think this report points this out pretty clearly, is to make sure that we treat diversity and inclusion in the same way as we treat any other of our professional responsibilities. When any of us in our work is asked to provide a business case or a financial justification, I don't think any of us will say that we really believe that it would be good if we made a profit. What we do is we try and make sure that we make the books balance and point in that way. We provide evidence. We look at what the data will tell us. So if nothing else, and this is, I think, the responsibility above all of managers, if we can start to treat diversity and inclusion as part of our professional responsibility rather than a sort of just a moral responsibility. It is that, but it isn't just that, or an indication or a way of showing everybody else at work what good people we are, then I think we will take a step forward. Secondly, what this report says very clearly is that we shouldn't, and Daisy's made this point, and I think Mark made this point also, that we shouldn't be in a situation where progress depends on a particular individual, even if that individual is the chair or CFO or CEO of the company. Because when that individual moves on, we don't want to go back to square one because he or she isn't there calling out and making sure that everybody's getting up to the mark. What we want to do is to make sure that we have systems and a culture and a set of behaviors which continue to drive progress. Thirdly, what I hope that people will do is use this report to increase what I think has shown up in the last couple of years, which is a readiness to discuss the questions of diversity and inclusion at work. I used to, at one point, chair a not-for-profit organization in the United States, and we did a lot of surveys, and one of them was really striking, which was a survey which asked people about their willingness to discuss issues of diversity at work. And particularly on the issue of race, what we discovered was that minority employees, and much more so their bosses, were very reluctant to talk about these questions at work. In fact, we found that more than 40% of people said that they would not willingly discuss race, and smaller numbers, but still substantial numbers, gender and disability. They would not want to talk about these issues at work. What we hope is that you will use this document as a way of making it, let's put it this way, a very British way, respectable to talk diversity at work. And fourthly, what I hope this report will do is give you a vocabulary. Now, why does this matter, and why does it matter right now? Some of you on this call may know that I chair a recruitment company called Green Park. We put several hundred people into senior roles, board minus one, minus two, each year. And one of the things that we are clear about is that if our clients draw from a smaller pool, two things are happening. It's not so much of a problem for us because we make the money anyway. But first of all, they are drawing from a smaller pool of talent. They're going to find it harder to get what they want. And secondly, that talent is going to come at a higher price. And that is specifically the issue right now in an extremely tight labor market. Government ministers never tire of telling us that this is a great employment market. We saw in the last month, there are more vacancies than there are candidates to fill them. And we know that that is not going to go away. It's not going to go away because of the changes in the demographic profile in this country and across the West. It is not going to go away because there are dramatic changes in the actual workforce in the labor market. For example, 40 years ago, far fewer women were in the workplace, were in the workforce. Now we have many more women in the workforce. They are not going to go back, thank God, to the kitchen. And that is going to change what we think and what we, as those of us who are employers, need to do. We are going to have to respond to the growing influence and significance of labour in the market. And we're seeing the power of labour in the market at the moment in perhaps what you might call a macro fashion. But excuse me one second. We're seeing that in a macro fashion right now. But increasingly, I think managers are seeing it in a micro fashion. That is to say, every employee who can go somewhere else will ask not just for money, but they would like their environment to recognize their particularity and their reality. And that's true in the way we deal with talent, whether recruitment or retention, or indeed productivity. We also, I think, need to look at the issues, draw out some of the new issues that are going to confront all of our organizations, and the way that we need to, for example, think about the expectations of our employees. Much higher expectation of fairness, much higher expectations of openness, both for those who work for us or with us, and those we would like to work for us or with us. They expect to be engaged. They expect to be part of decision making. My own company, for example, we now have what we call the Green Park Rule, and that is that no decision that affects more than 1% of our turnover, and that means big top hirings and so on, can be made by a group that is not diverse. Otherwise, it has to be minuted and reported to the board, and nobody wants to do that. And it's interesting. It's changed the way that many of our employees think about things. It's brought new factors into decision making, and I think it has made our decision making better. And that's in a way what I mean by systems and behaviors. And Daisy rightly said that the practical outcome of this is that when we leave this call, what would be great would be for people to think, what do I need to do in my particular place to make a difference? A big emphasis you saw in the video and in the report is on data. And that's increasingly significant when it comes to diversity and inclusion, partly because there are things we don't know that we think we know, but we don't. For example, our company, we recently did an analysis for a large retailer, a couple of 100,000 plus employees. And what we discovered was that they hired a lot of, for example, West Africans. But once we drilled down and got granular, we discovered that they were hiring Nigerians, but no Ghanaians. Nobody quite knows why, but I think it's a question worth asking, because that tells you something's operating in the process that the company itself does not understand, does not know. And that something might not just affect that particular group of people, it might affect the balance between men and women. It might affect the balance between young and old, and so on. So data is increasingly revealing itself not just as important in order to demonstrate that we're not discriminating, but to tell us whether we are running our businesses in the best possible way. We think that that the kind of suggestions that are made in this report will lead us to understanding the barriers that we are seeing more effectively. And Mark particularly mentioned the role of social mobility or social class, social grade, I think the social scientists now call it, in talent management and innovation. Increasingly, what we are seeing is that we are losing opportunities because people who would bring some fresh thinking to the way we do things and who will understand our markets better find that they're not being admitted, or they don't want to join our companies because they feel that they're out of place. And the last thing I want to say about this report, which I think is possibly the most important thing and a really significant issue for everybody who's concerned with diversity, equality, and inclusion. I think that for many years, many of us, including myself, have spent a lot of time looking backwards because we wanted to remedy the failures of the past, the failure to bring women into leadership, the differential hiring between different ethnic groups, the attitudes towards people's sexual orientation or their disability. And there's a lot to sweep up there. There's a lot to worry about. There's a lot of narrative in the past to think about. But I think we also need to be thinking about the future. We know that almost every sector is going to be dramatically changed by digitization. And we're already seeing that in some huge sectors, transport, for example, or retail, millions and millions of roles are disappearing. New ones are appearing, but the configuration of our workforce is being changed dramatically. We need to pay attention to whether that change is taking place in the same way for everyone. We know already, for example, that in transportation, there will be a dramatically asymmetric impact by ethnicity simply because of who already works in transportation, much more tilted towards ethnic minorities than the average. It's one of the things we learned coming out of COVID, by the way, that occupation made a huge difference to transmission. And that was probably the reason for the tilt, the skew towards ethnic minorities in the first wave. Something similar will be true about the changes, dramatic changes in retail. And I think managers are going to have to start thinking now ahead of that effect of how we deal with it. So I just want to say that to the CMI, to Mark and Anne, their colleagues, how grateful I am to have been involved in this exercise, because it's opened my mind to things which I had not thought about before. So allowed me to talk to people who've taught me many things. And this report is in a way distillation of the experience that I've been through in the last 6 to 9 months. So I'm grateful to that and for that. But I hope that this is an opportunity for everybody to learn and also to get ahead of the problems that are coming down the track. Thank you. And I'm now going to hand over, I think, to Daisy for the Q&A. I'm sorry, to Anthony.
That's fine. So Trevor, thank you so much for those very kind words about our work, and thank you for your role on the advisory council, which was critical in and around everything that we did. There's been so many takeaways from the conversation already this evening, but I think the Green Park rule is something that's going to have a lot of the people who are watching this evening scribbling furiously to see how they could apply it in their own organizations. And in this section of the event, I'm going to spend more time with the audience. And I've been looking at the comments which have been sort of flooding in from the many hundreds of you who have joined us this evening. From the nations and regions of the UK, I've seen comments from Southeast Asia, South Asia, the Middle East, Africa, North America. So it's a global conversation, and we're very grateful to have you. Now, please do put your questions into the comments, and we will be transferring them to the panel over the course of the next few minutes. But I'm going to dive in with a couple of questions of my own to begin with. I'm going to start with Anne, if that's okay. Anne, I think you coined the phrase, or you applied it to this setting, the say-do gap. And, you know, we see this gap between the sort of rhetoric that you hear within organizations, within companies, and their actual actions. And it's been one of the most stark findings of the research. You know, what for you are the dangers that an organization faces when it lets this gap develop and widen?
Well, actually, it goes back to what one of the fundamental premises of the report is, that this is about good business, not just about doing good. So if you are saying that you're doing these things, but you're not actually doing them, then your business will, and your organization, and your stakeholders, whether they're employees, customers, suppliers, or your investors, are going to suffer. Because, you know, Trevor said it, you don't say, oh, gee, I think it might be nice to, I'm going to say that I'm going to make a lot of profit, or I'm going to say that I'm going to save a lot of cost, or I'm going to say that I'm going to launch this new product. You actually got to do it. And so it is with diversity and inclusion. This is business building, organizational boosting opportunity. And the organizations that don't do it are going to fall behind. And increasingly, this is the expectation, again, it's been said tonight, of your stakeholders, whether they are customers, whether they are potential or current employees. Everybody is expecting you as organizations to do this. And actually, closing this gap is down again to everybody's job. This is not just the CEO's job. It's not just the head of ED&I. It's every single line manager. We all can close our SAID gap. And if we don't, we're harming ourselves, we're harming our stakeholders, we're harming our future.
Great. Lord Mark Price, from the start of the project, we challenged ourselves to reach beyond those managers and leaders who perhaps turn off at the mention of diversity and inclusion, to try and reach to them. Are there really still leaders out there who see this agenda as a distraction? And what are the key messages we need to use to change their minds?
Well, I think if you were to say to somebody, do you believe that people within your organization should fulfill the talents and the abilities they have? Should it be a meritocratic organization where people that work hard achieve and all they're capable of? And if you ask that question, I think 95% of people will say, yeah, I absolutely believe that. It's going to be the best thing for our organization if the best and the most talented people can contribute as much as they possibly can. I think that one of the things that's really difficult is that you grow up in an environment, you become used to it, you think that's the norm, and you don't really stand back and question whether those opportunities are really given. I was very lucky that I worked for 34 years in retail, and in retail, the number's pretty well out. You know who's doing a good job because you see the scores on the doors and you know how they're progressing, and you can record on that basis. In other professions and areas, it's perhaps less easy to do that. So what we discovered, and to be honest, it was a real surprise to me. I've always believed that people should rise as far as their talents and abilities take them. But what this shows is that that isn't happening. Perhaps we're not measuring it well enough. Perhaps we're not being conscious about it enough. And as we saw in the report, when asked, people say, yes, I do think that this is an inclusive organization and I do think that people are given a chance. But then when they look at themselves personally and say, but have you been discriminated against? A large proportion, half of them say, well, yes, actually, I feel that I have been discriminated against. And then when you look at the actual numbers of people from all these different groups in management roles, it's not fairly represented. So it's the thing that Anne just talked to. There is a gap between what we think's happening and what is actually happening. But I don't think anybody listening to this call would say they want to work in an organization where they're not fully utilizing the talents and skills of all of the people that work inside that organization.
Thank you. So Trevor, one of the great conversations the council had was on the topic of the government, and does the government lag instead of leading on this agenda? I mean, what do you see as the role of government and policy on inclusivity? Should they be doing more to highlight and support voluntary movements by employers, or mandating change, such as in the example of gender pay gap reporting?
Well, I think if I may just say a sentence about what's just been said, I agree very much with what Anne and Mark said, and I will just make one point, or I'll put it in two words: glass door. These are days where you cannot hide. In the old days, most of us who worked for large organizations knew that people outside the organization would find it difficult to understand what was going on inside the organization. Today, it's all out there and people know. So I think it's very, very important for everybody to grasp that, we have to, the say-do gap isn't a secret. Everybody knows that when you say you've got the thing up in your lobby, the plaque up in your lobby, if you're not actually fulfilling it, everybody knows it. So I think quite a lot of organizations haven't quite grasped that yet, and they still think that people will buy what they say about themselves. And the problem is the lack of trust is even bigger if people think you're trying to kid them. Anyway, on your point about the role of government, I am not. Those who know my political background might be a bit surprised to hear me say this. I'm not a great big fan of government intervention in the workplace. Generally speaking, I think that politicians are not really great at understanding how to do anything. And what I would really prefer them to do is to create an environment in which people who do want to get things done are able to do so. What they can do, however, in this particular field, is to make sure that everybody has a level playing field. One of the reasons that it was very difficult for quite a long time to get gender pay gap reporting off the ground was that the good guys, if I can put it that way, corporately said, well, yeah, we'd like to do it, but if we put our information out there, then we are at a disadvantage. And the people who basically don't want to do anything will skulk in the shadows and they will hide. What made a difference was when it became a requirement that everybody had to fulfill, and that therefore there was no longer any excuse for saying, you know, I don't want to do it because it'll be unfair. Now everybody's on the same footing. Everybody has to provide the same information, so it is fair. And that's the kind of thing I'm afraid that only government can do, and only government can deliver. So what I would say is that the role of ministers particularly is not to go about smacking people around the head and saying they should be nicer or better, but to do their jobs, which is to provide a playing field in which people can compete fairly, and where the issues that we're discussing are treated seriously as part of the industrial landscape. And the other thing which they can do, to be honest, is it's very simple. It's to provide information. I mean, again, what most of us in organizations want to do, we want to do well, but doing well usually means we want to be in the top quartile. But if we don't know what the top quartile is, or we can't trust the data about what the median performance about hiring is, or how we serve our customers, then how can we do that? So I think government again has a role in setting rules to provide a benchmark for us.
Great. Thank you, Trevor. That very, very clear. Now I'm going to take we've had a few questions from the audience. So the first one I'm going to fish out is from Helen Warren Piper. I'm going to put this one to Anne. Can you talk about unconscious bias? How can we avoid it and guard against recruiting in our own image?
Well, again, I think just recognizing that we all have it is a first step, but also then asking for help and calling it out. So some things that really help uncover unconscious bias are things like reverse mentoring. So making sure that you understand the lived experience of people who have very different backgrounds and experience to yourself. Increasingly, you can use data. You can actually look how many people do who applies, who makes your short list, who do you hire? Who do you performance review? How do you rate them? Who do you promote? Now, if you see patterns in there that say that you're favoring a particular sort of individual or a particular sort of background over other backgrounds, then you have a problem. But I'm also a great believer in calling it out. When somebody does something that may not have been malicious, but has a really detrimental impact, it's incumbent upon you as the leader or manager or colleague to point it out to that person and just say, gee, did you think about the impact that your remark had on X? Did you think about how that maybe made them feel? Get them to be aware of their behavior. I think that is probably, along with the data, the most powerful thing you can do, especially if you're a man and especially if you're a white man.
Over to me then, I guess. So quickly, on to Mark. So we had a question from Elena Shapoval. And she said, well, all this inclusivity, it's all well and good, but does having diverse decision-making influence the speed in taking critical business decisions?
Well, if the building's on fire and you all need to get out quickly, you just need somebody to shout out. But I would say the vast majority of decisions businesses are taking are for the medium long term. And there's no reason why you can't collect a wide range of views in making those decisions. I think that should be across different groups in an organization to know how it's going to impact at different levels. So I've never felt that long-term strategic business decisions needed to be made in such a hurry that you couldn't ask for a wide range of views from a diverse group of people. And I think that's very different from the building's on fire, we need to get out quickly.
Brilliant, thank you. And finally, we had a question from Robert Baker. So Trevor, what or should be the consequences for managers and organizations who fail to bridge the say-do gap?
Well, I think I'm kind of a believer in the market. And I think the consequences will deliver themselves. Your customers are going to go somewhere else. But I want to come back to a point I made, which is that for most organizations, most businesses, and this is true about the public sector as well, actually, the big limitation right now is talent. It's capability. The people that you want are costing you more, and they're harder to find. The people that you have are more likely to walk. And it's now not just a matter of money. It is, do they feel that they identify with your enterprise and what you're doing? There's a very nice piece of work done by a Nobel Prize winning economist, George Akerlof, called Identity, written up in a book called Identity Economics, in which he shows very, very interestingly that for a lot of people in most modern workforces, there is value, actual material value, in feeling an identity with the place that they work. And that comes from that place recognizing who and what they are. And sometimes, and quite most of the time, that recognition is non-pecuniary. It is simply understanding the things that bother you most, the things that you want paid attention to, the things that worry you. So I would say that, in a way, the answer to the question is that organizations have got to become more sensitive to what their workforce needs. And it just, by the way, in relation to what Mark said, I completely agree. To be honest, most organizations do take decisions rather too slowly anyway, but that's got very little to do with diversity. More often it has to do with anxiety about pleasing the boss. And I think that more diverse organizations tend to flourish because they've got a speak up culture where people feel free to share their opinions. They feel they will accept when told that it's not going to work. And actually decisions get made a bit faster if everybody is open and honest, rather than those organizations where the decision isn't really about what's best for the business, but what won't make the boss feel cross.
So inclusive culture and practice is better for individuals. There are huge costs to be paid without it, and opportunities will be missed. On that note, I'm going to finish off our discussion. I know there are lots of other questions. Thank you. This is really only the beginning of a very long conversation. I want to thank Sir Trevor Phillips and Lord Mark Price for their thoughts. I'm going to pass over to Anne to close us out this evening.
Thank you, Anthony, and thank you, Trevor and Mark, for that great session. And thanks the audience for the questions. And just before we come to the end of the event, I just want to talk about some of the practical realities in the everyone economy. Now, looking at some of the comments and relating them back to our discussion and Daisy's 5 key takeaways, I'm actually asking, there is a comment that says this is about senior managers. It is not. Let me reiterate. This is about every line manager. I don't care if you're a first line manager, if you're a middle manager, or you're a senior manager. You all have a team. You all lead people. You all manage resources. You can all do the things that we are asking you to do in this report. And what we're saying is, it's your job as a professional manager to do them, not because it's nice to do, but because it's going to unlock opportunity and growth. So those 5 things again, in addition to that Green Park rule, which I love, no decisions without diversity. First, ask challenging questions and pay attention to the answers. Listen, you may not like them. You need to listen to them. Secondly, put a plan in place and track your progress. Doesn't matter. You can, if your organization is doing this or not, you can do it as a manager and leader for your own team in your own area, and you can encourage your colleagues to do the same. Thirdly, embrace flexible working. Somebody's asking in the question, oh my goodness, my female staff are getting huge pay increases. Well, you know what? Flexible working is the equivalent of a 5% pay increase. That's what data from a leading economist is showing us, actually saying thank you, including people. These are what attracts and retain talent. Most of us are not strictly motivated by money. So remember that. Fourth, recognize, as I said at the outside, this is everybody's job. It's not just the senior management. It's not just the CEO. It's certainly not just the ED&I exec. And last, tell stories. Listen to stories that are told to you and be a role model, right? I heard a story yesterday. A CEO was missing his targets on gender diversity. And you know what his board said? His board asked him, oh, gee, do you want to lower the target? He said, no, I want to raise it. Also, somebody asked, what do you do when you don't close your say-do gap? Well, this CEO said, I'll tell you what I do. I fire them. Always an option. Anyway, these are not revolutionary, but we know they work. These are the common threads between all the champions and case studies. And it is absolutely essential that everybody in professional management does this. It's up to all of us to find our own actions in this area. And remember, we're doing it not only because it's doing good. Yes, of course it is, but because it's the good thing for the business and the organization. You'll up the outcomes. You'll up the ability to attract and retain talent. And that's incredibly important as we build a productive and sustainable future. So tonight I'm asking you all, please close your say-do gap. Read the report, identify the actions you can take forwards, and commit to making that change. Let us know. Share your pledges on Twitter and LinkedIn using the hashtag #EveryoneEconomy. We'll promote them over the coming days and weeks to celebrate the positive impact our community is having. And I want to share 3 additional things that we're doing at CMI to promote the Everyone Economy. The first, we've already revised our professional standard to align it with the Everyone Economy so that our professional standard represents the latest and greatest in practical management and leadership thinking. And across the coming weeks and months, we're going to keep adding practical resources on all of these key themes: diversity, sustainability, hybrid working, resilience, all of the things that we've been discussing this evening to equip managers for the future. Secondly, watch out for our Everyone Economy regional roadshows. This is a series of events across the breadth and depth of the UK where we'll engage our local community, bringing together leaders, business champions, CMI members. How can we mobilize you together? Share your ideas, share your successes, share your areas of challenge to continue to make progress in this arena. So watch out for what we're doing in your area. And one of those will be that parliamentary event that we missed this evening. And thirdly, we are launching a management bursary. We're going to sponsor 75 leaders of the future, people that represent the Everyone Economy that otherwise would not have the opportunity to improve their own management and leadership skills by giving them £1,000 yearly stipend for up to 3 years to learn about how they too can become a more inclusive manager and leader. Now, my final thought, I always ask my Leading Light interviewees, and many of the panel have been on that, and many other leaders, and I always ask every CMI colleague I meet with informally one question, which is, what would a fairer, better society look like for you? And the common answer, whether they're a CEO, a chair, or a colleague that's just joined us in a junior position, that everybody says to me is always that regardless of your background, regardless of who you are, you should always have an equal shot at proving your value and achieving your full potential. So I know that most of you, all of you, do believe in the everyone economy. It's just about making it part of what we do as managers and leaders. So thank you so much to Mark and Trevor, Daisy and Anthony for joining us tonight. Thank all of you for joining us tonight. Thanks again to the wonderful people who made the report possible, our fabulous council, the inspirational leaders who provided the case studies and the evidence, everyone who's fed into the process, and above all, of course, my wonderful CMI team who's worked so incredibly hard to launch this report and tonight's event. As Anthony said, this is the beginning, not the end of the conversation. Thank you for joining us. And now please help us to build the everyone economy. Thank you and good night.